let's let's move on from Ohio State. Let's talk about the Oregon Ducks, a new team in the Big Ten, but a team that you, me, and many other people believe that Oregon is ready to go. They are absolutely ready to go in this Big Ten. They're recruiting at a high level. They have the talent on their team. They have the fan base. They have the money. This is a team that is dialed. This is a team that is dangerous, dialed, and dangerous. The three Ds, the triple threat.
You just said dangerous twice.
The dangerous, dialed, and dangerous. The three Ds. Or really the five Ds, dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. But I'm going to give them three Ds. All right. This is a really good football team. Okay. I'm not sure.
I'm saying D's. Stop saying D's.
Dangerous.
Okay. All right. Let's get into this. This is fun.
Yeah. So speaking of dialed and dangerous, this quarterback room,
Wait, real quick before we
Dylan.
get into that, can we talk about the coaching staff
Oh
actually?
yeah, absolutely.
So Dan Lanning, obviously everyone knows about him, right? But I want to look at the coordinators that you have there. Tosh Lupoy, former Saban, Kirby Smart guy, obviously known as an elite recruiter, getting much better schematically now. I mean, you've seen him as he's gotten older. He's learned. He's developed. At his first stint as defense coordinator for Alabama was rough, right? The talent maybe wasn't quite up to par that year, but you still kind of struggled being a Nick Saban guy. It was pretty depressing, but you listen to him talk, he sounds like a Lanning guy. Process. I love that. I love the development he's had as a person, as a coach, and also, instilling that in his defense. The defense has gotten better every single year he's been here at Oregon, and I expect that to continue this year as well, especially having Dan Lanning also there. But Dan Lanning's taken more of a CEO approach and being a little bit less involved in the defense, but kind of being also involved in the offense, recruiting, other things that the head coach has responsibilities of. We talked about, the stress and strain of being a head coach. You see Ryan Day over at Ohio State give up his play calling duties because he knows he has a lot of things on his plate and he needs some guy who's really, really all in to be a good play caller. I do think Tosh Lupoy is a guy that Dan Lanning trusts to take over that defense, and he kind of get his hands off just a little bit. Will Stein offensively, holy cow! I was watching him on Big Ten Network, which is crazy, by the way. I was watching Big Ten Network, and there's Oregon. Um, his coaching mentors are crazy. So he was a quarterback back at Louisville, but he played for Charlie Strong, name drop. Jeff Brom was a coach there. Matt Wells, who's over in the Big 12 now. He also coached under Bobby Petrino, holy cow. Tom Herman, holy cow, offensively. Jeff Traylor, holy cow. Hank Carter, who's Lake Travis High School's head coach, if you know anything about them, and producing quarterbacks, holy cow. And now under Dan Lanning. This guy, I think, has head coach in his future, but right now, he's a really good coordinator for the Oregon Ducks.
And he's got a lot to work with at the quarterback position specifically. And, we saw him what he did with Bo Nix there, and it was an interesting hire. When they hired Will Stein, I think there were a lot of question marks there. But I remember when we talked about Dan Lanning in our like one of our first videos ever was second year coaches draft, right? And we were talking about Dan Lanning and we just hired Will Stein and how we were pretty high on him. And even though he was pretty young, yeah, absolutely. Ended up being kind of a home run there. And in the quarterback room, just kind of an embarrassment of riches right there. Dylan Gabriel, so many snaps, so many starts, high quality starts. Now he's played with Jeff Lebby his entire career. Okay. Jeff Lebby's gone. He's over at Mississippi State. We'll see what Dylan Gabriel is able to do without Jeff Lebby, but I mean, you're moving over to Will Stein. I don't really have a ton of issues with that. I do think losing Jackson Powers Johnson on the interior, because I've always talking about when you don't have tall quarterbacks, if you get interior pressure up the middle, can be a problem for those shorter quarterbacks. So we'll see what happens there. But I think Dylan Gabriel is really good. I think he's going to produce a lot of yards, touchdowns, rushing stat. Like he's gonna produce. Okay. Behind him, Dante Moore. Does that ring a bell? 5-star from Detroit, was originally going to UCLA, but then Chip Kelly gets out of there. I think he was getting out of there. I think he left anyways before Chip Kelly. Because I don't think he felt like he was being put in a good position over there. And I would agree with that sentiment. Now he's over there at Oregon. He gets a year to just sit behind Dylan Gabriel, learn from an experienced guy, get coached up, and then play behind a really good team. Hopefully he can take the reins down the road. And then, but Austin Novosad was a highly rated guy that, You flip. Did they flip him from Baylor? Was that what happened?
Yeah, yep. So what happened was is Dante Moore flipped from Oregon to UCLA, and then Oregon's like, well, let me go pluck a 4-star from Baylor. You know,
Sorry, Baylor.
sorry, Dave Aranda, you're not paying players yet. We'll take him and we'll go. So they got Novosad and Moore in that room to be the long-term answers. Pretty solid, pretty talented. I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the running back room, you lose Bucky Irving to the draft, and you more than anyone knows the impact that Bucky Irving can have on a team, and the fact that he left Minnesota is a testament to one, the running back depth of that room, but also just two, the blunder of that coaching staff and not using Bucky Irving more because he was unbelievable.
Yeah,
But Jordan James
yeah.
is arguably more versatile than Bucky Irving. He's just able to do more, and he's bigger, and Jordan James is a fantastic running back. I drafted him in our Big Ten running backs draft, fantasy draft, or whatever.
You're gonna be happy about that.
I'm gonna be very happy about it, especially because I drafted CJ Baxter, and uh, you know, poor thing,
Yeah,
brutal what happened to
that
CJ
sucks.
Baxter. But
That's why you have depth, though. And the depth in this room is pretty good, too. Noah Whittington, I think people like him. He came over last year from Western Kentucky. Jay Harris has done some good things at the collegiate level, albeit from a lower level. Jaden Lamar also in that room. Jordan James, is a guy, like you said, Bucky Irving got a lot of hype last year in the NFL draft, deservingly so. And he also was used in a fun way that made put him in space and had him do things, that Bucky Irving excels at. I also think Jordan James, he's not just a physical, power running back or, a goal line running back. He is a 3-down, versatile running back, much more than just a bruiser. I think in this offense as a feature, you're going to see him really, really thrive. And he can do multiple things, which gives this offense even more versatility. And Bucky Irving very good in space, right? But between the tackles, Jordan James can do both, right? He can do between the tackles, he can do outside. I really like that. I really like that for them. You're gonna be happy with Jordan James, I think, in your fantasy, as will many other college ball fantasy players, and the Oregon Ducks, obviously.
at the wide receiver position, you lose Troy Franklin to the NFL. I believe the Broncos might have taken him. Either way,
Him and Bo
yeah,
Nix.
I'm not worried. I am not worried at all. This wide receiver room is loaded. We did an entire video on it. I know you are a gigantic fan of even like the massive depth in this room. Not just your top guys like Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, Trayshawn Holden, Gary Bryant. Like you're also high on some of these other guys. Would you want to touch on this wide receiver room for us?
For sure. I mean, dare I say I don't want to say better than last year because you had
I
two
think it
1,000 yard
is.
receivers, but I think it is.
I
I
think
think
it
it's
is.
deeper. I think it's really deeper. Junior Adams, a guy, wide receiver coach there, he doesn't love to use a ton of wide receivers, but he even talked about this year going into 5 wide sets, going into 4 wide sets, and rotating these guys because the versatility in this room really draws me to it. Obviously, Tez Johnson was so good last year. His was a route yards per route run or average separation. What those advanced metrics on
Yards
him.
per route run, 30.45. Ridiculous. And by the way, his average depth of target was like less than 10 yards. That just tells you how effective he is. To have that kind of high yards per route run and an average depth of target under 10 yards, that means like once you have the football in your hands, you are more than electric. And that is exactly what Tez Johnson is.
Super exciting. Evan Stewart obviously is a freaky. Listen, I know he was inconsistent at times last year at Texas A&M, off-field issues, whatever it was, injuries. I think a healthy Evan Stewart is better than Troy Franklin. I don't think that's crazy at all.
I
I
agree.
think his talent is unbelievable. Yes, he's a little bit smaller, but he also goes up and makes contested catches with the best of them. We saw him do first-round cornerback Terry Arnold dirty a couple years ago. He's only getting bigger and stronger since then. You hope to see progression. And also in an offense where, listen, Jimbo Fisher, Bob Vitrine, like he's at Oregon right now. And Will Stein, I think they're going to put him in spots where he can really, really thrive. Makes a ton of sense. He ended up here. Trayshawn Holden, super solid, big physical, run blocker as well, which I love about him. Gary Bryant, former high 4-star coming over from USC. I'm sorry. Sounds like he's moving a little bit more towards that slot, which I think fits his versatile or his, you know, style a little bit more than he would have on the outside, which is really, really nice to see. Jurion Dickey, right? Former 5-star guy, very, very talented, battled injuries. Sounds like he's really progressing, coming in his own there. And you don't need him to be an alpha guy. You just need to give whatever he gives you is just gravy in that room. And then Kyle Casper, too. Kyle Casper is another young kid that specifically that offensive staff spoke up on and talked up him throughout the spring. He's a big dude as well, a different kind of body that you have with Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart. It's a really exciting room. And then you also, late in the cycle, you closed so well with McClellan and Pelham. Dylan Gresham is there as well. I mean, exciting time, exciting offense for Dylan Gabriel. Makes a ton of sense why you wanted to go there. Not only you saw the success Bo Nix had, but you're walking in an offense with just uber talent. It might be the best wide receiver room in the country.
And it doesn't stop in the tight end room. Like Terrence Ferguson was a guy that was incredibly productive. Not many tight ends had more than 50 targets. I believe it's less than 30 tight ends had more than 50 targets last year, and Terrence Ferguson was one of them with 400 yards, 6 touchdowns. Do you feel good about the rest of this tight end room though? Patrick Herbert, Kenyon Sadiq.
Kenny Sadiq, they're talking up a ton right now. What he can do in creating mismatches, he is the third fastest guy on the team. Now, I don't know if that's actually true or not, but that is crazy. That is crazy
When
that
you have Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart,
I
Gary Bryant,
no
that is
Whittington, Jay Harris. I mean, holy cow, you got some speedsters in that back end of your secondary as well. It's exciting. And obviously, Patrick Herbert. Oregon fans love Patrick Herbert. Just a good physical blocker. You love that. And obviously, if you're going to run the football with Jordan James, with Whittingham, I think it's really nice to have another guy in that room. Little different change up from Ferguson and Sadiq. Ferguson's still a good blocking tight end as well, but Sadiq is crazy. I mean, what he can do. I mean, listen, if you can be so multiple with this offense. You can rotate, you can be fresh. And Dylan Gabriel, what he does best too is just sitting back and kind of like Michael Penix did. And they highlighted it a lot as the year went on with Washington, where he scanned around the field and he just found a matchup that he loved. And you can do that with this offense and Dylan Gabriel because he's so veteran, he's so smart, he's so pinpoint accuracy that he can just find a matchup and then he knows his guy. If he puts the ball in a spot that they can catch it, they're more than not likely going to come down with it. So what a room, what a weapons room. I mean, it's exciting. Oregon fans, I think it's pretty awesome.
yeah. And you'll hear about it on the broadcast because every time Patrick Herbert catches the ball, you're just gonna hear. And that's the brother of Justin Herbert, former Oregon quarterback. You're gonna hear that every single time, Oregon fans. I'm sorry. It happened. Jeff Kent's kid when I'm watching Texas A&M baseball. Every time
Crazy.
they don't even call him Caden Kent. It's just Jeff Kent's kid. You know. So
Isn't it? But yes, that offensive line though, I mean, depth might be a concern. I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little bit concerned about the depth, especially
sure,
the experience on the depth. But that's 35,
good.
really, really good.
It's good. It's
I
good.
mean, those two tackles, I mean, obviously you've got the guys down at LSU. Texas has got a really good set of pair of tackles too. But these guys are really, really good. Cornelius, you're bringing back a ton of production and snaps from last year. And then obviously you throw in Matthew Bedford, who's got a ton of Big Ten experience and was one of the better players on the Indiana offensive line, who was coached by Bob Bolt's dad, too. He was a very, very good offensive line coach at Indiana. So you plug and play him there at guard. Oh, well
Com-
done.
Combined, those tackles last year had a 1.6% pressure rate. That's nuts. Only one sack allowed between them.
Part of that
18
too.
pressures. I mean, they were nuts. And guess what? We had questions about them leading into last year.
Yeah.
We had questions. Like we were like that was the concern about Oregon was like this offensive line, like on paper, it's pretty talented, but like, is it gonna work? Is it gonna do what it can potentially do? And it did. You lose Jackson Powers Johnson, but I still think you have your core nucleus of guys. Most importantly, your tackles. This is a good offensive line, dude. This is a good offensive line.
Connolly, I think, is future NFL guy for sure. And also, last year, part of that pressure rate too was attributed to the offense, how quickly your guys, Tez Franklin specifically, created separation, and so Bo Nix could just get it out quickly. But I don't see that being an issue this year either with the talent in that room, the decisiveness of Dylan Gabriel. And this offensive line room is really, really, really important in keeping him upright. Dylan Gabriel's a guy who has struggled with injuries, right? I mean, going back to UCF, broke his clavicle, missed games every year at Oklahoma as well. He needs to stay upright because listen, I know it's a lot. Dante Moore, 5-star kid, Austin Nova said super talented, but those guys are not winning you a title this year. Dylan Gabriel can actually win you a national title this year. I don't think that's crazy in saying at all. He needs to stay healthy. And the offensive line, Connerly, Cornelius, Iapani, Lalolu. I'm not gonna butcher that, but he was solid freshman last year. Like those guys are gonna be pivotal in keeping him upright.
Yeah, 1000%. And to note on Bo Nix, he was really good at getting rid of the football. Not only did he have a 2.44 time to throw, which is pretty nuts, and also a benefit of the offense that he's in, but also he had, I believe, like the lowest, if not a top three lowest pressure to sack percentage, which, is a translatable stat in the NFL and really, makes that sack stat look a lot better, of course, like I mentioned before, but it's still
Pressure rate was low.
still having a pressure rate and being in that offense, that's really like these are good tackles, right? They had an effective run game last year. They had an effective pass game. Like they were able to be really good last year, and there's no reason why they can't do it again. There's no reason. Now you're gonna be playing against some better edges, looking over at Ohio State. Um, actually, that's really Illinois' got some good edges. Michigan's got some good edges. Maryland's got a pretty decent front seven there. I guess you're still playing some, but yeah, you're gonna need those guys to stay healthy for sure, like you were talking about. Then let's move over then to the defensive side of the ball. I think a side of the football that I think a lot of people are interested to see whether or not it's going to translate to the Big Ten. Look, I'm looking at the defensive line, and yeah, I like it a lot in terms of depth, and I think the talent is there as well.
Yeah, I mean, starting with Jordan Birch, he was a guy that came over from South Carolina last year, former five-star guy himself. I thought he improved the last year in terms of what I saw from him on tape at South Carolina. I think another step would be really, really nice for this Oregon staff, but you also have a ton of other experienced talent in that room. Last year, you got guys like Blake Purchase, Tatum Tulioti, and Mateo Uyangale, a lot of snaps last year. And I think that's really going to benefit you this year. Those are guys that were high 4-star, 5-star kids with length, athleticism, bend, talent, right? All things you want in an edge rusher in the Big Ten. And it's not just on Birch. You got guys that can rotate. You can stay fresh in that room. And also, by the way, Elijah Rushing too. I mean, I don't know how much he's going to give you in year one, but holy talent is that as well. Another 5-star kid. Um, to me, the guy that they're circling right now is Mateo Uyangalele. I mean, he is a guy that the staff continues to rave about, continues to talk about his growth. Did he play tight end last year too? I heard them say that, and I didn't realize that at all, but that is pretty crazy if he did as a true freshman playing edge and tight end. Speaks to his athleticism, speak to his willingness, his coachability, all things you love to see in a talented player like him. I do think you need to improve your pass rush, though. I mean, you saw Michael Penix just dotted you up. He just dotted you up. And yes, he was doing it unbelievable rate. And he had NFL linemen in front of him as
Yes,
well. But
yeah,
I if you're going to go to places where you want to be at, if you want to give Ohio State problems like you want to, Michigan's bringing in a brand new offensive line as well. Georgia, these are good to great offensive lines that you're going to have to get pressure on because you're bringing in a lot in the secondary, which, listen, I like that transfers there, but it would be nice. You have to get to the pass rusher if you're going to win playoff games, meaningful games in December and ultimately January.
I thought the defensive line did a really good job against Oregon State, especially
Yeah,
against the run.
that's a solid
Shutting down
offensive
David
line.
Martinez, and you're going to have to stop the run in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And part of that's you bring in a guy like Derek Harmon, who was a pretty highly touted, uh, one tech there in the portal coming from Michigan State. How do you think he's gonna? How do you think he's gonna fit over here at Oregon?
He
Do
was
you
a
like him a lot?
Yeah, he was a really good Big Ten defense
Yeah,
tackle.
I
Him
agree.
and Simeon Barrow were one of the few bright spots on Michigan State last year. And you pair him with Jamari Caldwell coming from Houston. That is a guy that talent evaluators really, really like. Now, yes, he was really good last year in the Big Ten or Big 12. We'll see how he does consistently down in and down out within that defensive line group in the Big Ten because you're going to need him and Harmon to step up. I think stop the run because you do lose. Excuse me, you do lose some guys in that room, and some of the depth there might not be quite experienced and or
On the
not
interior,
quite on the interior, yes, or quite as talented as those two.
yeah, I still think it's a good group. I think you got
Oh yeah.
about 6, 7 guys that you like a lot that you can rotate in there and can get good snaps from. a lot. So I'm all right with this defensive line group. At the linebacker group, how we like the linebacker group? I mean, I think it's pretty good. I'm all right with it.
Yeah, Jeffrey Bassa, holy cow, he's really fun to watch. He can cover, he can make plays. Former safety guy, you see those traits translate to linebacker play last year at Oregon. And then you also Justin Jacobs, a guy who was a little bit banged up last year, I think, but he's got good Big Ten experience from Iowa. Bryce Betticher, also another guy, depth in that room. Devon Jackson's a fun guy. I mean, he is a sub 11 100-yard time as a linebacker, as a junior in high school. He's been flashing more and more in fall camp, which is really, really nice. Finally putting those tools together, with mentally getting a part of that defense. We'll see how it translates to this fall. But if he's a guy that can give you solid snaps, whether it's certain matchups that you have against, the talent that is at Purdue, or, you're going multiple tight ends with Michigan and Wisconsin, see how that works out, or obviously in, the playoffs with some other big time caliber teams. I think that can be fun for you behind those guys. It does worry me a little bit depth wise. You're hoping Jackson can put it together and be quality depth,
I mean,
but
I'm okay with the depth here, and part of the reason is a lot of this is projection and uh kind of look. This is the only group that they did not bring a transfer in right this year
good
to this
point.
defense.
Great point.
And do not tell me that they couldn't have got one. Do not tell me that Oregon could not have gotten the transfer linebacker out of the portal. They're returning an all Pac-12 guy in Jeremy Bass. And I think the rest of these guys, I think there's enough there. And I think they're going to find it. I think they're going to find it. I think it's going to be fine in the depth. I think even though some of these guys haven't played a ton of snaps, right? I'm looking at Blake Purchase. I'm looking at Jerry Mixon. I think that some of these guys can do stuff. And I think they're talented enough where, if called upon, I think they can be fine. And I do think that this secondary, well, I mean, we'll see how the secondary is. I happen to like it a lot, but with the defense line that they have in the secondary, I think, and Jeffrey Bassa, of course, being the leader of that group, I'm not really worried. Unless if Bassa goes down, I would be definitely worried because he was an all Pac-12 level player. Uh,
Yeah.
he just is very special, right? So I would be worried if he went down, but I feel pretty good about this room. I feel pretty good.
Well, and also their ease of play too, playing behind that D line, which we think, if it is what we think it will be, it's gonna be pretty nice. And we talked about that a lot in the Big Ten here. Good D line play absolutely helps your linebackers, especially if you have
Oh yeah.
athletic ones like Bassett, Jacobs, and Jackson.
So let's talk about the secondary because I mean, look, they had Kyrie Jackson last year and Evan Williams, and RP Kyrie Jackson. What happened to him was pretty terrible. Um, and Evan Williams was also really good as well. But guys, look, those guys were two all Pac-12 players, right? So they're like, all right, we're losing two all Pac-12 players. So let's add an all Big 12 player in Kobe Savage. Let's add another all Pac-12 player in Jabbar Muhammad. And then let's add an all ACC guy in Brandon Johnson. I mean, loaded. I mean, I think like your top end talent here
And
in the
I'm
secondary.
sorry, all American Athletic Conference, Cam Alexander as well.
Yeah, oh, missed that one. So you have really special talent here on the top end in your secondary. I happen to love this starting 5 or 6 for this team. These are all guys with lots of snaps, productive snaps, and I think they're going to benefit a lot from playing with each other. I know that it's a new secondary, and new secondaries are scary, and fixing your secondary in the transfer portal is not normally going to work, right? It doesn't normally work. But I think this is different. When you are bringing in all conference talent from many different conferences, it's going to work. All right. I just,
Seniors.
I have a very good feeling. Yeah, all seniors. I mean, like your top 6 guys probably that are going to play are seniors, and then Jalil Florence is probably like the first guy. Roderick Pleasant. I mean, that are not seniors. Those are your first guys that are not seniors. Otherwise, everyone else is a senior in this room. So I feel really, really, really good about this secondary, which is why I'm not so worried about the depth of the linebacker room because I think this secondary, I think that defensive line is good, man. So
That's a great
I
point
think
there.
every position group on this Oregon team has really good talent. And that's why we're talking about them as a playoff team, as a potential national championship competing team.
Listen, the only question I have about the secondary is at the safety position, the depth there. How does that young depth step up? How do they develop if they are called upon in big situations? Aaron Flowers, this guy, we've talked about this offseason as being a really, really highly rated kid coming out of school, coming to high school. He's flashing in camp, right? But again, it's camp, it's fall camp. The bullets aren't really flying too much yet. We'll see what happens if he's ready to be called upon in October. And therefore, after that, Peyton Woodyard, a kid who's got his feet wet at Alabama, transferred over to Oregon as well. Kingston Lopa as well. I mean, these are young kids that we'll see what happens there. Obviously, with you're hoping everyone stays healthy, but you might not. And I know Brandon Johnson. I wonder if you can move a guy like I wonder if you can move a guy like Manning or Florence and play some kind of safety or dime role with them, but it does concern me just a little bit. And I'm getting nitpicky here because that's the level that we are judging Oregon at. They are a top tier program. I'm gonna get nitpicky here, and it's just the safety room does concern me a little bit. Although if Aaron Flowers is what we think he was coming out of high school already, I mean, I think that would be a massive benefit, massive boost for my confidence and obviously that coaching staff there and what they can do defensively in that secondary.
Brandon Johnson is so good, man. I mean, I know that he took, a step back last year or whatever. Brandon Johnson is so good. All right. I'm very confident he's going to give you great snaps in that nickel spot. Jabbar Muhammad, I mean, what school didn't want him? Kobe Savage, I thought was really good as well. I guess of the guys that they brought in, I'm probably like least impressed with Kobe Savage, but his resume still speaks for himself. So I like love this starting room in the secondary. I guess that's every position group. Do you want to talk about this schedule? Because they still got some premier games on here. You're out of conference. You have Ohio or Idaho. Sorry, not Ohio. Idaho at home. Boise State at home, which, you know, not that they're going to lose to Boise State, but it is important to note, like, during the course of the season, if you have a 16 game season, right, like the physicality, it can add up, right? Boise State's not a slouch team over there in the Mountain West, probably the favorites to win the Mountain West. Oregon State on the road, a team that, yeah, obviously was decimated, but
Pissed
it's
off
it's the
Oregon
Civil
State.
War. It is the
Yep.
Civil War. So
Do not expect a friendly welcome in Corvallis this year. Not that you ever would, but I'm gonna be pissed off.
yeah, and then you got a bye week after Oregon State, after physical, gritty game in the Civil War. You get UCLA on the road, which fortunately for most teams in the Big Ten is a long travel,
Yep.
not for Oregon.
You love that. You love UCLA on the road. If you're Oregon this year, and we'll talk about UCLA later on in the video, but or later on in the full video, right? UCLA is a team you want in this conference on the road, especially if you don't have to travel across multiple time zones to get there.
Yeah, so then after UCLA, you go to East Lansing to play Michigan State, or sorry, you get them at home, sorry, and then you get Ohio State at home, which I think is a big deal because traveling to Ohio State your first year in the Big Ten, that being the first premier team that you have to play, and you have to play them on the road, I would see that being very challenging. On the other hand, now Ohio State has to travel all the way to Oregon to play you several time zones over. So I like that. And I like the dynamic of having Michigan State at home the week before. So you don't have to like travel and then like traveling multiple weeks at a time or flipping flopping. Like that still can be taxing. Having a home game for Ohio State, I think, is pretty good scheduling dynamic. And then you get Purdue on the road, Illinois at home. I don't see you having a problem with those games. Michigan on the road is going to be really interesting because we talked about how good these tackles are, but I don't think this offensive line has seen anything like they will see against Michigan. Now, 2 years ago, actually, I don't think any of these guys were starters 2 years ago. Could be wrong about that. But when they played Georgia, you saw that defensive line just maul this team, just maul them. So it'll be interesting to see that. I do think Oregon's defense matches up well with Michigan's offense. So we'll wait and see for that game. Then you get Maryland at home, Wisconsin on the road. Then you get a bye before your Week 14 game against Washington, which I believe personally that they will not have a problem with that game. They're over under win total. By all accounts, it's 10.5. You can get it like minus 110. You can get it even some places, DraftKings and BetMGM. So if you're going to bet the over, please bet on one of those. Don't be taking it at minus 110. None of that garbage. All right. Get it at the best line. So, CD, where are you at with this over under win total? Given the schedule, given the team, given the coaching. You never
I
know.
I would rather take a Oregon to win the title than their over. And you hear me out here. I think they can still win the title going 10-2. The reason why I wouldn't bet the over is I think if they go the over, I feel really good about this team doing big things in the playoff.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that the thing is concerns about the under depth at quarterback, depth at offensive line, depth at safety. Those things all concern me. I know I'm getting nitpicky here, but I do really like the dynamic of playing Michigan State on a Friday before Ohio State. You get that extra day to prepare, to sit back and watch Ohio State play Iowa of all teams, right? And maybe see what they can do there while you're sitting home, recovering, resting, icing, waiting for Ohio State to come all the way to Eugene, Oregon. I love the dynamics there. A lot of people are talking about Purdue that week after on a Friday night at Purdue. And who am I to, discount the spoiler makers? Obviously, what they've come to know my in the Big Ten, and maybe they will spoil Oregon season, in their welcome season in the Big Ten. But I don't quite see it. I think the talent gap there is too different, unless you've got some injuries for Oregon. Don't quite worry about that. Listen, you said Washington. Yeah, I like Washington. I like Oregon in that game for sure. At Wisconsin, it'll be interesting after a long stretch. You're going week 4, you have a bye, and then week
Yeah.
13, you have
Seven
a bye.
straight. Seven or
Physical
eight.
football
That's your
games.
eighth straight week with a football game.
8 straight Big Ten games, and I
And you're
know
going to Camp Randall. Like that is not that's that is a sneaky game. I think you're right about that.
it could be interesting. And Wisconsin's got a tough schedule in their own right, but they've got a bye before that game, so you could see some different things. I think from that Badger team, but I feel good. Even going to Michigan, you could still lose that game. Ohio State, you go 1-1 and you hit the over there. I I'll just say the over, but in terms of if I would to bet something, I'm pretty close to taking, Oregon to win the whole damn thing. Go big or go home, right? Instead of just taking the over at 10.5, because I think if you
Yeah,
hit the
I
over,
agree.
I think the value is okay.
One,
You
you're
still
in the Big Ten
really, really good.
championship, almost certainly.
And if you're not, even better. I mean, you get to sit back and not get beat up that game against a team like Purdue. Wow, against a team like Penn State, Ohio State, or Michigan. So yeah, this team is good. Not a lot of holes, especially on that top 22. Some depth at some spots scare me for sure. But wow, well coached, hungry, physical, athletic football team. What can go
Yeah,
wrong?
I think I'm with you. I would rather bet them plus 250 to win the Big Ten than taking the over 10.5. Um, they're favored in every single game, by the way, this year.
Yeah,
You didn't know that?
Ohio State. What's
Even
that
Ohio
line?
State,
Ohio State line.
minus 2.5,
Yeah.
which is
Which means neutral
really
side pick
interesting
them.
because
Neutral side pick them against Ohio State with that talent.
yeah,
Listen, who's got a better quarterback in that game? Is Oregon?
see, like
It probably is.
it. I think the right answer probably. Here's what I think. I think Will Howard's really good. I'm higher on Will Howard than I think a lot of
Oh,
people are. So
me?
I think Will Howard is more talented than Dylan Gabriel. Although I think Dylan
Well,
Gabriel's floor
much higher.
is much higher. So, but like if Ohio State needs someone to elevate their game to win a game on the road, like I think Will Howard has a better chance of doing that than Dylan Gabriel. Or if you
I
want
will
someone to just if
say,
you want someone to win the games that you have to win. Now I know that Oklahoma lost to Kansas last year, but that wasn't necessarily Dylan Gabriel. Well, it kind of was Dylan Gabriel's fault. All right. But
the rain delay, the thunder delay, it was weird.
yeah, it was a weird game. Jason Bean, legacy game. So I think I have to take the over here, but I don't. No way in hell am I betting this. Yeah, I'd way rather, like you said, take them to win the Big Ten at plus 250, or take them to win the national championship at. Hold on, hold on, hold on, plus 800.
Yeah, to me, that's where some value is, especially if they get a good draw in that playoff. I will say, going back to that quarterback situation, Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel, I think both are very uniquely fit to their offenses and their skill talent on their team. I think if you switch those two quarterbacks, I think both offenses would get much worse. And I think I think it's hard to compare those two because they're, first of all, Will Howard's 6'5", Dylan Gabriel's maybe 5'11", and
Right.
lefty, one's righty, one's a huge runner, one's obviously, very, very good throwing the football.
So people are probably going to be upset that I said that Will Howard is at least as good as Dylan Gabriel, which I don't think it
He
shouldn't
won't put
be
up the
I don't
numbers.
think it should be a hot take. Like I
He
don't think it should be a hot take.
he won't put up the same number. Like Dylan Gabriel will
No,
throw for more yards
Will
and have
no,
more
absolutely.
touchdowns, but Will Howard, in terms of impact on their team, and you go to baseball, so they had like a WAR, right? I want it. It's not crazy to say that. I personally like Dylan.
I think I like Dylan Gabriel with Will Stein more than maybe like Will Howard with Chip Kelly. Is that fair to say? I'd say that, but Will Howard as a quarterback, I think is better than Dylan Gabriel. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. Is that stupid?
that's your opinion.
That's fine. All right, fine, whatever. That's fine. I'm chilling.